Just imagine that you could walk into a card game tournament, sign up, play one round, and you have a guaranteed prize of $5,000 to $10,000. Would you do it? Well, this scenario could happen in Chengdu during the regional opens in China, but no one played Garen. Legit, not a single player walked in with a Garen deck, so no one won the metal foil card for best of Garen. But now let's talk about the best performers for the Order Legends. Best of Teemo took the 205th place, and it's basically a Miracle Draven, but just without the Draven part. And that's essentially a great choice if you have purple in your deck. If you want to fight for a metal foil card, probably one of the purple decks that you can play is the best choice, because you can put in just the purple package, which is Ezreal, Scrap Heap, Stack Deck, Cold Shot, Traveling Merchant, Treasure Hunter, Last Rites, and Rasa, and then sprinkle whatever else you need from purple to make it a good deck, and then see what can you add to the Order color. And in this case, Teemo just added basically Thousand Tail Watchers and Singularities, and that's basically it. Now the problem is that even though there are only 2 blue cards in the main, they require 2 blues. So you have essentially 3 Singularities, 2 Thousand Tail Watchers. Both of them, in most of the cases, they require you to pay 2 blue. So the split on the runes is still 6 and 6, which is not the best choice, right? But also remember that in case of Teemo, you can utilize the blue color essentially as a way of hiding your cards. So essentially you pay blue for the purple card, so it's a little bit more efficient. Like switcheroo, you hide switcheroo, you use blue, so it doesn't matter if you have a 6/6, but you definitely need the blue when you're gonna start like chaining Singularities, for example, or starting chaining Thousand Tail Watcher into next round Singularity and so on. It's an interesting deck. It's not very good, like you're not gonna see it super perform, but it has this potential ceiling that will allow you to fight still like on even footing with non-Draven decks essentially, while being able to fight for the best of Teemo. 188th place is being taken by Best of Rumble, and I'll be honest with you, this deck, even though it plays blue and red, this particular Rumble doesn't have any removal, which can be kind of interesting because like someone would expect you to have some form of removal because you're playing red, but this deck basically has none. And in sideboard, you're gonna find 2 Singularities. Other than that, it's just an honest deck that just try to hold the location. That's why you also see 3 times Cloth Armor, 2 times the signature spell, which is not the best itself, right? But it allows you to split, for example, the might between 2 locations, 2 battlefields at the same time, or the base as well. So there's a little bit more usage to it than, let's say, signature from Viktor, but it's still not a phenomenal spell. And basically, if you manage to play Ferris Forerunner, you just lose against any purple deck that just rebukes you and just lose an entire turn or 2, right? So that's one of the issues that the deck has. It just doesn't mesh well against the purple color because you're trying to hold your battlefield, but the purple just absolutely wrecks you. One fight or flight suddenly gets one of your units away from the battlefield, and then you're being swarmed with the others creatures that are attacking your leftovers. And that's why there's one Minotaur here. Like the Minotaur is able to keep you in those locations because suddenly you cannot move to base, so you play around fight or flights, but it still doesn't counter rebuke. And I wouldn't be surprised if you would actually see more Minotaurs in the main than one, because one, you're not gonna even see it more often. Like I think it's like pivotal to have this, maybe even play Vilemal Lair, right? Just to make sure that you can hold, like just play it, just play the location, play the Minotaurs, and play around fight or flights because that's such a problem. But still, you don't have an answer to rebuke. And that, I feel like that is probably why Best of Rumble, Rumble in general, is struggling in this meta game. Until we have rebuke in the game, he might still struggle in the future, you know, unless we're gonna get a counter spell in blue at some point. Best of Darius took the 187th place, and essentially it's a deck that tries to capitalize on ready units. You have Kaisas, Dariuses, we have Legion Rearguard and Eager Drake Hounds. All of those units can enter ready if necessary. Then on top of that, you have 2 Rengas, which basically are also ready. They just require you to have another unit that can attack instantly during that round, and essentially Renga also enters ready with 5 might, so that's pretty significant. And then you have tricks that allow you to also transfer might later on, so you can, like, for example, you can go Legion Rearguard attach a longsword or do a cleave, attack a location for like a 6 or 5 or whatever, win that probably, then do a death grip on that legion, transfer the might to another creature, and that other creature attacks the other battlefield, and suddenly you have like plus 11 out of 1 card, right? So there's some neat combos over here, and you have the possibility also of like capitalizing on ganking with Game Jammer, which allows you to be aggressive 1-10 on one battlefield, and then suddenly you don't have to have any kind of like untap mechanics like with a Darius to gank from one location to the other just because you play the Game Jammer. But still, this is an honest deck, and that's its problem, right? It doesn't have like potential card draw. It doesn't have like too many tricks that can completely blow your opponent out of the water. It has big problems against fight or flights and rebukes. Like your end game just doesn't like really do anything about rebuke, right? You cannot really play even Ferris Runner against a purple deck. And then we have one Bryn here to avoid kind of cards like that, right? But it's only 1 copy, so I wouldn't mind if this would be actually reversed. Have 3 copy of Bryn Here's and 1 Ferris Forerunner, and then 2 copies of Ferris Forerunner in the back, because you're gonna be playing like probably around 40% of your games against Dravens. You're gonna be siding them out anyway. But then other decks are also purple, so you don't want to play Ferris Forerunner. But overall, it's a cool deck, but unfortunately it's just too honest, and that's the problem. Also, why 2 copies of Seal of Rage? I don't really understand. You are pretty power hungry when it comes to this deck, so you would like to have 1 as early as possible. 2 is kind of like, I don't know why would I want to have 2. It's either 3 or 0. I don't think you can play any number of seals. I mean, you can play like 2 plus 2, for example, right? But just using 2, I think this is a straight up mistake, and it should have been either 0 or 3. Talking about more honest decks, we have a best of Lee Sin 186 place. Wait, is that correct? 187, 188? 3 decks in a row were best ofs. 188, 187, and 186 place. That's kind of funny. Anyway, this is just like a kind of worse version of Master Yi, right? You just play a worse unit as a champion unit. You have access to the same cards, but you do not have a significant legend power as Yi. I mean, you can play more units on one battlefield, and that's nice. And overall, your legend power is more capable long term, right? But you're gonna lose the tempo early if you're gonna use it, or you're not gonna gain anything early game, so you'd have to survive till the late game, when you can actually benefit from the Blind Monk more than Master Yi from its own passive. And that is a problem. That's why Lee Sin kind of struggles overall in Origins, and it's gonna struggle still in Spirit Forge. But this is probably one of the most efficient ways of playing Lee Sin. I'm not gonna act like I'm an expert, because there's just no reason to play this deck. So yeah, kind of unlucky. I mean, yeah, the end game is basically Aurelius and Lee Sins, and there are three Lucians, and then everything else is just small units, and you need card draw, so you play Stellarcorn Herder, but you don't really have a lot of ways of actually moving that unit as well. So I mean, there's Emperor's Divide. Okay, there are some options, never mind. There's Emperor's Divide, and you can also add ready with Confront and First Mate, so actually scratch what I said about that. So that's nice. Strap in, guys. This is a Dragon Volibear, and I never seen it perform. There's definitely someone playing already a Dragon Volibear somewhere on the planet, but this one actually performed and won the best of card, right? So this is a full dragon deck. You have, I think, almost all the possible dragons, excluding the free drop, that is the Hound that the Darius played actually, that enters ready. But we have other dragons over here. We have the Heralds of Scales, Blazing Scorcher, Dune Drake. We have Direwing, Fey Dragon. We have Cat Dragon, the Infernal. I have Mountain Drake. Like, it's so funny that this deck actually won something. I was fully expecting an Aurora deck when it comes to Volibear. I wanted to actually just completely almost skip it, and I would just wanted to say, yeah, this is an Aurora deck, go next. But then I see, well, like, what the hell? Not a single Aurora in this deck. But even in the sideboard, we don't have an Aurora, which could be a choice even without any ramp. Like, you have a natural ramp built in Volibear, and then suddenly, if your opponent sees that you're not playing Aurora and they will not side in any hate, maybe there would be a point in playing Aurora in the sideboard, you know, just food for thought. Other than that, there's the Show of Strength that draws you cards for each mighty unit. I don't know how problematic draw is in this deck? I guess a little bit. Like there's absolutely nothing apart from confront and angle shots that replace itself, right? Other than that, nothing else draws here, and carriage ring is dependent on other mighty units. So I don't know. I mean, when I played against a friend of mine who's actually playing Volibear with Aurora, he has a lot of card draw, but then the ramp and the card draw kind of helps with that. So yeah, to some degree, of course, Volibear draws as well himself, but it's an interesting deck. I wouldn't recommend playing it at any events other than like Nexus Nights or when you're going for a best of Volibear, but it's definitely nice to see a dragon deck for the first time do something actually in Riftbound. At 137th place, we have Misfortune Aurora deck, so there's no surprise over here. We have spoken about this deck on the channel multiple times. It's nothing surprising. Really, there's literally not a single surprising card in this build. Well, maybe the fact that it plays 2 bullet times, but other than that, it also doesn't have sabotages in the main, only in the sideboard. That is peculiar, but I'm assuming that it's only going to be sided in when you anticipate gear hate, right? That's about it. But yeah, it capitalizes on, it's kind of weird, there's only one dead bloom. I would anticipate 2, like a 2 dead blooms and 3 mind splitters typically is an end game, and then you have the possibilities of just queuing them with the last rights, you know. But overall, this deck is a high roll deck, right? Sometimes you just straight up when you have the perfect hands, when you can look for like you know, like cold shots, actually a pretty significant buff to the deck, because you're able to use the cold shot on the turn when you have 9 resources, and essentially having access to cold shot gives you 2 potential draws to top deck a Aurora. It is a little bit high rolly, right? Because you have to tap your runes to float resources, float those in case you can get a Aurora in the top 2 cards twice if you repeat it, right? And that allows you to play that Aurora there, but if you miss it, then it's a problem. But you know, you just dream-ramped yourself for 2, but you're still gonna have 9 in the follow-up. So it is a significant buff when it comes to the new expansion, the cold shot. I kind of like it. And then he had, like, I would say maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like maybe Misfortune might be the most consistent Aurora deck that you can play. I don't know. Let me know in the comments, because I don't really play Aurora decks, but it seems to me like with all the package that you have here, like the stack decks, the cold shots, treasure trove, pack of wonders, then you have also the mobilize, like all of that helps you to be more consistent. So yeah, pretty interested in your opinion, guys, specifically also if you have experience on multiple different Aurora decks. Let me know. Best of Ahri is in 110th place, and I'll be honest with you, I play against a lot of Ahris on TCG Arena. It seems like people just like the deck. Maybe there's, you know, the non-tailed fox tax. Everyone just likes Ahri. I mean, I like Ahri myself. I played her in 2x KO as well. But overall, this deck has a lot of tricks, but the problem is it's still a little bit honest. It requires you to have the control of the battlefield to capitalize on cards like Charm and like Blitzcrank. Wait, is that Charm here? What the hell? Where's Charm? There's no Charm in this deck. Okay, I'll be honest with you, I'm a little bit surprised here that we don't see a singular Charm. I just assume it's a given. So this deck basically only plays Blitzcranks when it comes to moving the opponents. And it's also important because you have Twonks to capitalize on attacking units, right? So you try to use Blitzcrank and Charm to capitalize on Twonks to make sure that those units are getting stunned and pulled. So that's a little bit weird. I'm not sure what to think about that. Also, only 2 defies and 1 not so fast, so that's not much, but it has meditation. I don't know, man. This is like a weird version. I don't personally like it. I'm just like, I wanted to, typically I look at the deck list before I started recording, but this one, I didn't even pay attention to the fact that there's no Charm in this. Peculiar build. Not sure what to think of it. I don't really like the fact that we have like 2 meditate and 2 find your center in this particular build. It tries to ramp out a little bit, but at the same time, it doesn't seem like it's consistently doing what Ahri would like to do. So yeah, this is a little bit odd. Best of Renata is 108th place, and I love this deck. I really do. I don't think it's like a min-max version of this deck, but it's very unique, plays completely differently from any other deck that I've played in Riftbound, and that's why I love it. I played a lot of it on stream, and I also played it once in my Nexus night locally, and I had a lot of fun. it's a very unique approach. Basically what the deck tries to achieve is tries to get as fast as possible to 5 points. That's why you see Arena's Greatest, and believe me or not, but you actually start with the Arena Greatest, so you get the +1 point, so you only need 4 more. Even if you go second, you start with the Arena Greatest. On the other locations you have the Hillock, which allows you to gank. You go with this when you're going first, right? And then you have the Treasure Hoard when you're going second. That's basically the choice here. And you try to trigger the Camp Baroness to make sure that your gold suddenly also adds energy, and that when that happens, you have very explosive rounds when you can play multiple Time Orbs back to back. You can just go for like very aggressive space taking. You have Echo to capitalize also on untapping your runes, so you can, like, for example, spend 10 runes, you had like 4 gold, and then you also used Echo inside of those 10 runes plus 4, so that's like 14. You use 6 on Echo, so you have 8 other ones left. You attack with the Echo, you crash, you untap your 8, and then you still can play a unit or something. It's really like there's a lot of options. It's just very important to establish a hold on your first battlefield. That's why the Shen is here as well, and you try to like use the Phase Breakers and the Hidden Blades as soon as possible to make sure that you're gonna start producing the gold, because it requires you to hold, but also to capitalize on the points as soon as possible. So it's a very cool deck. I really love it. I think you can min-max the builds. I feel like it needs definitely one more tool drop. Like, if you're interested, you can see on my stream the deck list that I'm playing, but I'm gonna probably make a video about it because it's just so fun. I wanted to show you this deck a little bit more. So big kudos to this player in China. I unfortunately don't know the name. Even if I knew it, I would not be able to read it because it was in the Chinese dialect, right? So language. I didn't know what it means. Now, yeah, will this be ever good? Probably not. But if you want to have fun, this is a great deck. 93rd place is Best of Lux. It's basically Viktor doing a cosplay of Lux. Like, you just have almost exact card by card like the Viktor deck. It's just the difference is the champion unit and the fact that this deck tries to use Time Orbs in main to capitalize on Grand Plaza, for example, with the Recruit the Vanguard and the Vanguard Armory, right? So you have like a possibility of spawning a lot of units, even more than Viktor actually, because Victors don't really play like Recruit the Vanguard, right? But because when you are drawing cards when you play a 5+ spell, well, it's a little bit more enticing to actually use Recruit the Vanguard. Overall, is this a good deck? Probably not. I mean, not probably. Not very much. Viktor is just basically better. But if you like this kind of deck, like, you might actually enjoy it. Or if you're a fan of Lux, it's not a terrible deck and it's definitely playable. What I really like about it though is that it has pickpockets and main. I think in current metagame, this is actually pretty good inclusion, specifically against Miracle Dravens or any purple deck that uses seals, right? And then you also have Reksai, for example, that uses seals like every single time. I don't really play a Reksai without seals, at least the one that plays Baited Hook. And you can see occasionally some seals on other decks like Yellow Blue also kind of sometimes play some seals. So Viktor decks or like opposing Lux, but that would never happen. And of course you can also destroy tapped gold, which gives you gold. It's not the best deal, but it's always something. We're not gonna spend a lot of time on the Best of Yasuo on 92nd place, because basically this is a purple-green deck just like an Irelia, but just without Irelia, right? You're just trying to achieve a similar result without the very big potential of the signature spell of Irelia and the potential of untapping creatures. Here you just have to pay 2 mana to move them, right? So other than that, the package is almost identical, but you do have Last Rites as a one-off here. I think maybe Irelia should consider maybe using that as well as a one-off. You don't need the Boots of Swiftness in this particular deck because you can just move units, right? So that's one upside over Irelia, but other than that, it's just not that much different. And I feel like you can play Yasuo in current metagame, but if it's gonna be like a copy of Irelia, that's not the best choice. But you can still play a different kind of deck, like a slower controlish build. I played against a friend who's actually playing Downwells in his own Yasuo, and there's a plan there, but you just have to play a completely different style than what we have here with like this movement type of you know, positioning based deck like Irelia. And here we have best of Jinx 81st place, and it's quite high actually, and I'm not surprised because Jinx is basically Miracle Draven but without the Draven. You probably heard that at the beginning of the video already, and you can see where I'm coming from, right? This is basically the same thing but different. Cue the gif with the meme, right? Anyway, the point is, you play the purple package, you have Razas, you have Last Rites, you have Battering Rams from the red color, right? So you have access to the same combination as Draven. You play not even a terrible leader, like your champion unit, the Jinx Rebel, is actually not that bad because whenever you untap, she gets +1 might and she readies. She is really not that bad. Like, I know Draven overall is way more powerful and it makes more sense to play Draven, but the Jinx Rebel is actually fitting to this deck because now you're capable of discarding card with your traveling merchants, with the zone warrens, and be able to utilize, or with Ezreal, and be able to utilize additional movement or additional might, which is cool. Now this deck also tries to capitalize on Nocturnes, and I feel like this is a good direction if someone wants to play Jinx, because if you do exactly like a miracle driven version but just swapping, you know, the Jinx with the Jinx Rebel, you're probably not gonna win a lot more than the Miracle Draven, but this one is just more casino based because you're able to capitalize earlier and just run away with games. That's why you play the Nocturnes, that's why you play also Noxus Hopefuls, but you still have the same kind of end game. You just have a gap in the middle when it comes to consistency, right? So that's the thing about this Jinx Rebel, but it can still just randomly win games. Not sure if I like the Blood Rush, like just randomly being put here as a one-off. Maybe a third copy of Noxus Hope would have been better. But overall, this could be a good start for you if you want to play for a best of Jinx in Bologna or in Las Vegas, because I feel like you can definitely min-max this. I don't like the Mystic Poro, by the way. I know you have 3 Nocturnes, but I really don't. Like, think about it this way. Mystic Poro essentially gives you 1 out of like 35 and 1 out of, I don't know, 30 to hit a Nocturne. Like, those chances are very small, and you could have a 2-drop here that had an actual impact. Remember that this deck is power hungry, so having Treasure Hunter probably is a better choice than the Mystic Poro, even if you play Nocturnes. Jax is basically very similar to the Master Yi with Trinity Force builds, but it has a little bit of that skewed direction towards equipment naturally because of the legend itself. Grandmaster at Arms has to have some value, otherwise why just not play Master Yi? The Master Yi is not even that popular, so actually fighting with Master Yi for a metal card also kind of makes sense, right? But overall, this deck is another one of those honest kind of decks, unless you play Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike is, in current metagame, I think very well positioned because you don't have any good ways when it comes to dealing like instant damage, right? So a Counter-Strike is not gonna be able to be like popped before actually something happens, unless we see more Kaisas, because then, like, let's say it this way, Counter-Strike is better against spells that deal damage because you use them in reaction to when something is about to resolve. But if you want to avoid combat damage, then cards like Hextech Ray, for example, completely nullify a Counter-Strike, right? Because you play Counter-Strike, you try to go into resolution of the damage with the combat, and then Kaisa goes, wait, I deal 3 here, pop the shield from the Counter-Strike, and the Counter-Strike is ruined. But I think that is in the case of when actually Kaisa and like red decks who play those damage spells are popular. And right now the most popular is essentially purple, right, which doesn't have any deal damage spells, and the red decks do not play a lot of damage-based removal overall. So maybe Jax is a little bit better positioned than I initially thought in this current metagame, but that might change in the future because I still do think that Kaisas should be like a tier A, maybe like a lower tier A deck, and there should be a relatively big size of them in both Bologna and Las Vegas. And talking about Master Yi, we have here one with the Trinity Force. So this one also has 1 action in the main. Again, I would say, like, you have to play more of them. You know, they're just great. And you have Guardian Angel, you have Brutalizers, you have equipment that you can equip it on round 2 with it. Although I would probably play more Guardian Angels if I played more action in the mains, for example, right? To capitalize on that. Your end game is Ruin Runners, and the Navori Scout also has has some interesting choices here. like marching orders, man, I really don't like this card over challenge in your main deck. Not sure I understand that. I think this card is just strictly worse than challenge, unless you really want to use it in the end game to like destroy multiple creatures when you have like really big creatures, or like capitalize with Twong. But I don't know. Wait, this is combat damage. No, doesn't deal combat damage, so it doesn't even work if I'm not mistaken. A stunned unit will still deal damage with marching orders. Yeah, it definitely doesn't combo, so there's disregard what I said about the potential synergy between stun and marching orders. So that's a little bit surprising. Other than that, I'm also surprised to see no fortified battlefield, the one that gives you +2 shield, because you could have been capitalizing on that very early on with like the even with the normal Poro, it would be a 6 shield, right? And that's pretty big. Sorry, 6 might. And if you choose the shield Poro, then it's a 7, which is a very big number for such an early stage of the game, right? Specifically also, as I mentioned with the Jax that I just spoke about, in this metagame where there's almost no damage base removal, having shield is actually better than in a metagame from like set 1, when it doesn't matter if you have shield or not, you're gonna get Hex Degrade or you're gonna get Falling Star and you just get completely destroyed. But the problem is with this Master Yi that if you don't hit a Ruin Runner on your turn 3, then purple is just gonna wreck you. And that is a very big problem playing around the rebukes. You only have not so fast for this here, right? And Ruin Runners, of course. And the deflect is not even that important on the Navoris card. Dravens will just eat that. Maybe they will not even pay too much because they're gonna have gold. So yeah, still 71st place, not bad for 512 people. 63rd place is Best of Sett, and this time it's not an Aurora set. It's just a normal, honest to God set with not really many surprises, apart from the fact that it has 2 marching orders and free challenge. Now here I understand this more, because you already maxed out on challenges, and marching orders is essentially challenge 4 and 5, because you just your strategy is just using those challenges and marching orders to maximum extent. So I do understand when you play more copies. This is like kind of like with spinning axe and the sword, the long sword for the 2 and 1 that has quick draw, right? So I understand this here. I'm not gonna complain about this, and I just didn't play a deck like this as well, so maybe it's not as bad as I imagine it is, although I probably think it's that bad as I imagine. And I would probably prefer to have a 3rd Hidden Blade than a 2nd Marching Order. Other than that, we have pretty big and significant endgame. We have 2 Fey Dragons here alongside 2 Kinkumongs. Those are essentially the same card but with bigger body, right? And one of my biggest worries when it comes to playing Sett was always just reaching this amount of number of energy. 7 is very expensive for a Sett deck, so I don't know if they reach this comfortably, but because the deck is just so power hungry, right? So I do wonder how often do you actually play the Fey Dragon in this particular Sett build, but it doesn't feel like you would use it that often. Anyway, other than that, Lucian here to take advantage of the Warmog armor as well, and there's no other gear here, no? Yeah, there are no weapons here at all, no BF sword, no, not Dirk, no anything like that. So basically this Lucian is only for the Warmog's armor, and then you can capitalize with like the Showstopper and be like more mobiles, kind of similar to some degree Fiora has a different, you know, like with the ganking on the potential turn on their follow-up, you're able to be more mobile as well. So this basically just is a good card in Sett, and obviously 1 Sett brawler, because you should not need a 2nd copy if you play Sett correctly. Now the problem is that this deck still loses to Rebuke, so yeah, good luck. And just an off mention, there's Cannon Barrage in the sideboard, and that card is very badly needed against purple colors that do play Overzealous Fans. Essentially, this is the card that allows you to kill them before they are triggered, right? So before they are resolved, so you don't trigger the Overzealous Fans when your opponent decides to use them. So very important card in that particular matchup. This is why it's in the sideboard. One could think that maybe you should have in that main board because purple is just so prevalent. 56th place is a Aurora Sivir. Kind of similar approach like your Misfortunes. This one is just basically more focused on the purple. You have a full set of Mind Splitters, 2 Deadman Predators, 2 Less Rights. That's the end game I was talking about when it comes to Misfortune, and 2 Possessions to have a little bit more flexibility on what can you do with additional slots for creatures without actually botching up your Aurora, right? Other than that, it's very similar. You have the potential drawing package. You have also the cold shot, which you can use on a 9 resource turn to again like float your energy, try to dig for the Auroras, which I very much like. You are able to ramp. I know it's not direct ramping, like Battle Mistress doesn't give you direct ramping, give you just gold, but because you have more access to gold, you might not de-ramp as much as you would with, for example, Misfortune. So that's an upside. And other than that, there's not much to say about this. And is Sivir better than Misfortune as an Aurora deck? Probably, but not by a big margin. I would say it's slightly more relevant because I feel like also Sivir, the champion unit itself, is pretty significant when it comes to a lot of matchups because it's just a chunky unit, right? So that's pretty neat. And other than that, yeah, not much to say. 51st place is Azir, and I'll be honest with you, Azir has a problem when it comes to talking about the potential deck lists because all of them have similar foundation. Like you have to play equipment, right? You have to, and currently there's not much of the equipment that you can choose from even. So every single Azir deck is gonna be playing Doran's Shields, Eye of the Herald, Guardian Angels, and Brutalize, right? Like you will be playing those, and of course BF Swords, right? So this is like every deck. This is like the premier cards that you have to currently play. Then on top of that, you add the Arise, and you have your base, right? Death Grip is great in Azir. You can kill your tapped units, transfer the equipped might with like a BF Sword, transfer that someone else, and be very efficient. I'm a little bit shocked about the Lonely Poro over here. Not sure how good this is in the current like metagame. Would just not be better to play maybe a 3rd Desert Call instead of one of those? And also there's a Salvage in main, okay, as a one-off. I mean, not a terrible idea, but at the same time, how badly you need it in your main? Like, what's the worry here? Like, do you just prepare to just destroy like a spinning axe in a fight? Maybe that's the case, you know? Like, you have a lot of options here. Like it could be like a second copy of a Facebreaker, but yeah, probably not. Don't listen to me. But 2 Calder Weeks, actually interesting. Most people play 3, right? Same with Viktor, but at the same time, I do understand because sometimes the card is clunky. Like sometimes you just sit with like double Calder Week in your hand and be like, yeah, I can never use 2. Or sometimes they just straight up win because you have to, right? And you have 2 copies of the Calder Week and opponent can play around it. The only thing that is not like the standard in China, because I would consider this standard in Europe, is the Under Titan. The Under Titan is basically a better stratagem. One of my opinions on stratagem is that it's basically overkill, you know? It's overcosted, like the free power is huge. And you get that +5 on every unit, but you don't leave anything behind, and typically those fights are being won by a huge margin, so you don't need +5. So Under Titan kind of solved this problem where it does give you +2, which is probably more relevant in Azir than in, for example, Viktor, right? When Viktor plays smaller units, Azir has smaller units but with equipment, so with the +2 you probably are still strong enough to go through any opponent, but then it leaves a unit behind and it doesn't deramp you as much. So I think Under Titan is much better in Azir than potential stratagems, while Viktor has a little bit more argument for the stratagem because your units are typically 1 and not gonna be taller than that. But I would say that Under Titan still should be a consideration over stratagem if you play a unit-based Viktor. 48th place is Draven cosplaying an Annie. That's basically it. There's not even Vi left in this deck. It's just basically a Draven deck that plays Annie instead. And because of that, you try to capitalize on more spells that can utilize the 2 energy every turn. So you have the Ride the Winds in 2 copies, you have the Fight or Flights in 2. Alright, look, if you would show me this deck list without numbers, there is no way I would say that Fight or Flight is 2. Like, this deck needs 3. But hey, that's my opinion. There's also 3 copies of Flash. Would probably prefer to have 2 Flash and 3 Fight or Flights, you know, but that's me. Other than that, we have also Ferris Forerunners here on the top side, which I don't know if I like, because again, like against purple colors, this is gonna be a card that you never want to use. So maybe having access to something else here like Brain Hears or even the Mind Splitters from the side could be more reasonable. But at the same time, you have to think about how often do you get to 7 resources with an Annie. But you do have Treasure Hunters, which give you access to easy gold. So it's a pretty cool deck. You have 2 hard bargains in the main. Against the odds as well, because of the fact that you have the untapped 2 resources. So this makes sense. This card in Draven itself doesn't make that much sense, but in an Annie actually it does, because you're gonna leave units on the field, and when your opponent is gonna try to go over your units by like multiples, suddenly against the odds changes the math drastically in your favor. So I like this. From this deck, the thing that I like the most is actually the against the odds in the main, because it just makes so much sense in this particular deck. On 45th place, we have a Leona, and I have never played Leona in my entire life, so I'm not gonna make any judgments over here. I'm just gonna tell you that it looks pretty standard from what I see. Zenith Blade is an incredibly powerful card. It's just unfortunately in Leona. And other than that, you have the Blitzcrank and the Sonars. One of the win conditions here of this deck is setting up a Sonar on the battlefield, so you can finally utilize the plethora of tricks that you can have in this deck. And the problem that this deck is facing is card draw, and none of the cards in this deck are actually like filling that void. So you're gonna have a big problem when it comes to card advantage. So you're losing hard to potentially Dravens. Rebuke just fucks you over. You have to get the not so fast for rebukes. If you don't have it, you just straight up lose, and that's one of the biggest problems with Leona in current environment. So, and also probably against Viktor control, you probably have no way of winning as well, I would say. Like, you don't really have a lot of units, and then Call the Weak just gives you so much value. It's actually insane. Decree plus Bellows Breath is also so hard to play around. So yeah, but 45th place is incredibly good, by the way. I'm not certain which matchups did this person play, but getting to 45th is impressive with a Leona. So congrats to this player. All right, look, I am mad at just looking at this list. This is a best of Lucian at 42nd place, and I legit don't understand. Like, I don't think that Lucian is a great deck, but even if you would play Lucian, I would never play, like, you know, like the combo version. I just feel like that's so inconsistent. But if you play the combo version, please play it in 3 copies. There's no way that you play the combo version and you have 2 Trinity Forces and 2 Skyfalls. You have to play 3 of both. And why on earth is there a Dune Breaker here? It doesn't make any sense. Like, this card, it just doesn't make any sense to have this card over here. And also remember that this particular deck, there's only one action, which actually would benefit from being in this deck so much more than any other orange deck, because this deck actually does play a lot of weapons, even more than a Fiora. So this is a little bit odd for me as well. Other than that, this is one of those decks that kind of catches people off guard if they never played against it. But if you played against this and you know what to expect, then it's so much harder to win with the Lucian, even when such powerful cards like Relentless Pursuit actually push you forward. The best of Reksai from the 38th place is a deck that I know very well, played it a lot on stream, and I feel like it's a great deck to play, but it's not particularly super powerful, and it doesn't have many great matchups. It does have some, like you probably never lose into like a Viktor control, you know, or like any kind of control like this, because you have just such a big way of recurring your units. But at the same time, I am annoyed at seeing the cards selection here in this particular build. Like, my build is just playing 3 Sundisk. I think you cannot play this deck with less. You just cannot. It's such a particularly powerful card that allows you to win against control decks, because now suddenly almost every card you play is gonna have ability to go into a location, into a battlefield, win, and then play another card. It is instrumental to have Sundisk in your deck, and if you only have 1 copy, you're gonna be in pain in most of the times. I also don't like the Void Hatchling. Like, those are the slots that I would just replace with anything else when it comes to 2 drops, and there's a lot of options when it comes to red and yellow. So it is a fun deck, but you know, it's like, it's not as powerful as you think it would be. and probably it's still the best Phoenix deck that you can play, but maybe Kaisa actually. But then you don't have the slots to play that in Kaisa. Anyway, you know what? It's a fun deck. If you want to play it, it's actually reasonably strong enough to compete, but you're probably never gonna win a tournament with it. And talking about best of Kaisa, this is the 37th place. I actually really like this build, and that's something that I will test out in the upcoming week. I love playing Kaisa. I spoke about this on stream. I think this is a great direction for the deck because people just don't see it coming. They get excited, combo with the time warps, basically dealing with any creature that is being played, right, for 2 resources. Action speed, you just kill a unit. That's a great stuff. And even if you lose card advantage, you have a way of getting it back. There are 3 progress day here. And one thing that I talked about on the stream is that I would probably test out 2 progress day, 1 premonition. That would be my choice, and also probably 3 piercing lights, 2 falling stars, or like just swap something else here, because piercing lights are fantastic in current metagame against so many Dravens when they typically play a 2-drop and then follow it up with a Draven, and you can kill both of those units. So piercing light is really essential in the current metagame. I like the fact that we have the 3 Forest Forerunners in the sideboard, because that allows you to swap and have a possibility of winning against Viktor control, for example, right? And then Rocket Barrage is a modular card that plays against opposing units, but at the same time it's a gear removal. So if you ever meet a gear heavy deck, you suddenly have 5k. I don't even know if you're gonna side 5 in, but you have the option to, so that's pretty cool. 34th place is Ornn. Pretty impressive finish, the top 34, almost top 32. So which if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if I'm right actually, but I think if you are finishing like top 34, which means that after Swiss you had a very high standing, because you lose the top 64. I think they still have the single elimination in the top 64, and essentially this means that you finished Swiss in a very high placing and then you lost the top 64 match. So this guy probably had, or girl, probably had a pretty significant Swiss portion like result. And this basically is a control on with the headers for the card draw, and without spells actually like Progress Day or Premonition. So you have the Power Snacks. Wait, are the Power Snacks in here? There are actually no Power Snacks over here. That is quite interesting. That is quite interesting. So basically the headers are changing the slots with the snacks, and you have Apprentice Smiths to also compensate for the lack of the card draw in the deck. It's an interesting decision tree here that is different, completely different from like playing a deck with card draw that doesn't have legs attached to it, right? So the Premonition, the Power Snacks, and so on. So there's Consult the Past as a 2-off to additionally draw cards, but that's about it. Other than that, you have really powerful equipment like Styrax Gauge. I need to really learn how to read that. And Zhonya's Hourglass is a little bit iffy because you play also like 2-drops in this deck. So I'm not sure how to feel about this instead of having Guardian Angel. It's kind of, I mean, it's counterintuitive. You don't want to play Zhonya's Hourglass if you have a 2-drop, but if you have a hand with Zhonya's Hourglass and no 2-drops, then you can't really play the 2-drops later on. So I don't know, but it seems like the player, you know, scored decently well with this deck, and also has the potential Tiana Crown Guard to finish the game if opponent doesn't have an answer to it. On the 24th place, so in the top 32, we have Best of Viktor, and this deck is essentially not a control deck. It has the best pieces of a control deck because it has the Bellows Breath, the Imperial Decree, the Singularities, and Call the Weeks, of course, and Hidden Blades. But other than that, it doesn't capitalize on much more removal. Other than that, it's just focusing on fair units and Xin Zhao, right? So you have some 2-drops, you have built-in 1-drop, and then Xin Zhao benefits from having being played ready. Like when you go first, you essentially gather a lot of points because Xin Zhao just goes over any battlefield, typically in that spot of the game at 4 resources. So that's pretty neat. Now, also we have the 1 back-to-back and then 2 more in the sideboard. I'll be honest with you, I really don't understand why so many copies of this card, but hey, I would have to speak to the player, and I don't have that possibility. There's also no Armory, which strikes me as weird. It's one of those cards that you can just side in specifically in matchups when you feel like you want to play around spot removal. So in matchups against like other yellow, it's actually great to have the armory. You don't have to play Jace, just play armory, right? And in this case, the players opting to have phase breakers and grand stratagems instead, and it seems like phase breaker and grand stratagems are being put in the same matchup spread, right? Because you're trying to go over like big units, and then back to back kind of similar function. So I'm not really like understanding fully the idea behind the sideboard, because it seems to be very skewed towards one particular matchup. But maybe in the mind of this player, that was the problem and nothing else was the problem. And he has a very high finish, so maybe he's right, you know? Just random observations over here. Then we have Seal of Unity in 2 copies. And I already said it, I really don't like that. You either play 0 or you play 3, because if you draw them later on, you don't need them most likely, and you don't draw them often enough if you don't have 3 copies, because it's a significant less chances to draw Seal of Unity as soon as possible. So that's an odd choice. And also, my god, what are those locations? I mean, basically one, Rockville path. Someone has to explain to me this, like, why is this being played? Like, I have no clue. Like, what do you play this against Reksai? But Reksai is just like, there's nowhere to be seen essentially. And maybe against Miracle Draven, which wants to play like multiple units on a location on a battlefield that they take, but it's still like, I don't know. I struggle to find the reason to have this in your deck. And then we have the top 8. So we have Irelia, and we have broken down this deck already in the previous video when I was talking about the top 8. So I'm just gonna show you the deck lists and not talk about them, because if you want to listen to my opinion about the top 8 decks, you can just find the previous video about the Chengdu top 8. So then the 3rd place is Ezreal, which is, by the way, a very cool deck on the Rat. And if you want to play something fun, I do recommend checking out this deck. On 2nd place with a Fiora with a baited hook, and in theory this deck looks very straightforward, but when you start playing it, it's actually pretty complex to play, and it's very punishing, not for your opponent but for you. If you make a mistake, this deck is just feels like such a bad beat story. You know, it's like when I played against a local in my local gaming store who plays the Fiora with the baited hook, and I just see like on his face when he makes a mistake, he's like, oh god. It's like this, the smallest of margins, and just that one decision making just makes you just feel like you're crushed, because you just lost a game because of your one small decision that did cost you so much tempo, for example. So it's not an easy deck to play. That's the point of my anecdote. It's something that you have to practice, and if you thought this is an easy deck, it's definitely not. And on the 1st place we have Draven, and I think this is probably one of the best, if not the currently best deck list I have seen in China when it comes to Draven, because it does capitalize on 3-offs. So you have a plan, and then the 2-offs are more situational, but they do kind of make sense. But personally, I was testing out a version that has piercing lights instead of falling stars because of mirror matches, right? As I explained before, with like how it works against other Dravens, and tries to capitalize on a little bit. I know I don't like 1-offs, but I do kind of think that maybe when they try to live in the same kind of area, you can have more 1-offs. Like, for example, I have the 4th copy of Spinning Axe in form of the longsword, and that occupies the slot of the Edge of Night, right? So small changes here and there. But on that, this deck is probably very, very cool. And you're gonna be expecting a lot of testing to be done against this particular version of Drake. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next video. Leave a like and comment and a reply if you have any comments. Love to always answer you in the comment section. Bye bye.